School's out for summer, but the teacher's keeping us after school. Welcome to a brand new episode of Movies and Me, and today I've got one of my closest friends from the Tough family finally making her debut on Movies and Me. Please give respect and welcome Miss Ashley Davis. How you doing, buddy?
I'm very good. Thank you for that very kind intro. My heart is touched.
I swear, this is because of Billy. Everyone gets punny intros. I'm going to start calling it Getting Paula Hand. Anyway, we'll get right into it. When I said that I was going to do Movies and Me, you said that you wanted to be on, and firstly you picked Spaceballs, but then we went into To Kill a Mockingbird, which we're going to be talking about today. So I got to know, Ashley, what made you choose To Kill a Mockingbird?
While Spaceballs is a very important movie to me, I just felt that To Kill a Mockingbird holds a very special place in my heart. It's not something that I grew up with. I think I was like the one English class in school that we didn't read the book. My husband went to the same school as I did, and their class read it. So I wasn't introduced to this until I actually became a teacher. I teach ninth grade pre-AP English. And so the first time I ever was experienced this movie was probably about like 8 or 9 years ago when I first taught it the very first time. And it instantly, the themes and just a very good movie.
To Kill a Mockingbird, it's such an important part of film literature and book literature with Harper Lee's book, which is also incredible. And there's such a classic feel to this. To Kill a Mockingbird to me feels like it's a time capsule, but it's still incredibly relevant. So is there any part for To Kill a Mockingbird that you can bring up that makes it like a personal choice for you?
I like what you said about that it still feels relevant, but also being a time capsule. The movie came out in 1962, and just like the situation with Tom Robinson and the trial definitely makes it stay like relevant because there's still class issues and racial issues in the world. So it's definitely something that we've made a lot of progress, but when you go back and look at that movie, it's like we haven't gone as far as we needed to.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and we can't talk about this movie without talking about what I feel is one of the best performances in a movie yet, and that's Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch, who I was told that he read the book in one sitting and then happily agreed to star in the movie, and it's rare you hear stories like that, and Gregory Peck absolutely kills it.
Yeah, they offered him the job, like, hey, can you play this character? He hadn't been familiar with the material, and read it in one sitting and said, he'd happily do it. That's a long book to read. The audio book is 12 hours long, and it's a 31 chapter book, so anybody that can read it in like one sitting, like he must have like really felt a connection to it, and it's a really good book.
Yeah, sadly, I don't know anybody who can finish War and Peace in one sitting, but To Kill a Mockingbird I think is very possible with some patience.
Definitely. And just like no other things that you have going on in your life. Just go sit and read.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know this movie as inside out and as well as you probably do, because I've only seen it twice, once a couple months ago and another time to prepare for this show. So I'm hoping you can maybe enlighten me on some of the things. Now, parts that I love is the tension and the tragicness of the court scene, and yet there's no like action elements. It's all dialogue, it's all emotion driven. You can tell that from all the characters' performances and how the guy on trial just feels like a sore thumb in that scene, and that kind of stuff really gets to me. But it's the stuff that also happens with his children and their neighbor Boo, I believe his name is, in the neighborhood. How does that kind of fit in for you? Because I'm still trying to process it.
Well, like the novel of To Kill a Mockingbird is what we would call a Bildungsroman, or a coming-of-age story. So it's about the children, and the trial and all of that stuff just happens to be the backdrop of what they're coming of age to. And so the movie had the task of taking these two parts of the novel and trying to make it into a cohesive feature-length movie, which the studio didn't even want to make because there's not like a whole lot of action, like you said, especially like in the trial scene. There's no big swelling romantic plot, Atticus doesn't have a love interest or anything like that. So it was definitely a challenge for them to bring these two elements together. And so, like, we have, like, the little story with the children, with Boo, their neighbor, who is this mysterious figure in the town. They're afraid of the house. It's kind of like the haunted house of the neighborhood, where they're like, okay, there's all these rumors about like what happened, and their friend Dill, who comes from a different town, comes to visit them in the summer, and his aunt is the one that tells them, like, oh yeah, like Boo stabbed his parents, and like you need to stay away from that house because like that's just crazy people. And so there's that part of the novel where like the kids are, or the movie where they're trying to like, you know, get him to come out, and like he's this mysterious figure. But then there's also the trial elements, because Atticus is brought this trial very early on in the movie, whereas in the book it happens a little later. And he's tasked with defending Tom Robinson, who's an African-American person who's been accused of raping a white woman. The novel and the movie are set in the 1930s, so this is the height of the Jim Crow era. So Atticus is kind of taking a progressive stand by actually giving Tom Robinson a proper defense, instead of just saying like, oh yeah, like I'll be there, whatever. Like he actually intends to, you know, do his due diligence on this, and basically the whole town is kind of against them. It's more played out in the book than in the movie, but you do kind of get some elements of that with there's a scene where town members try to attempt to lynch Tom, and Atticus is in front of the courthouse or the jailhouse, basically defending him and saying like, you need to go. And it's actually the children, specifically Scout, who is able to reach through to them and get them to realize that like this is wrong, we need to go.
Yeah, and the way that you're describing it there, that makes me think of a negative analysis on it. Like, Bowie, you said he's set up as this, like, mysterious guy, and the guy on trial, it's clear that the town has seemingly made up views about them, almost to try and villainify them. So is that, like, a theme that you could say works in with this movie?
Yeah, definitely, because the actual family that has accused Tom Robinson of this heinous act, they're kind of known in the town as not being like the best. Like again, it goes into more detail in the book, but they're kind of like the lowest rung of people. Like their dad doesn't have a job. There's a bunch of children on the place, and he kind of like is an alcoholic, and he's very abusive. So they're trying to pin this on him because the daughter was caught in a compromising position with Tom Robinson. She's a young white woman. He's an slightly older African-American man. And you have to remember, even in the 1960s when this was released, that would have been very controversial, even more so in the time that the actual movie is set. So it's kind of like that, her trying to redeem herself by saying, oh, I wasn't actively pursuing him, I was, you know, he took advantage of me. And so that she's trying to save herself.
So it kind of shows that even it's like you want to protect your own image, even if it means ruining somebody else's.
Exactly, and it's very important to notice during the trial when Mayella, who is the character that has made these accusations to her and her father Bob, when she goes to put her hand upon the Bible, she actually hovers right over it. She never actually touches the Bible when she says, I shall tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Damn, I didn't notice that the first time round. I'm going to have to rewatch it looking for that.
Yes, and then because in the very beginning of the movie, especially the stuff with the children, because they're trying to condense a novel that is so lengthy into a feature-length movie, there's a lot of heavy exposition in the beginning, and so there's not a whole lot of subtlety in some of the parts, but then once it really gets to that trial, then you see kind of more subtlety and nuance with the acting and the characters, and just like the way she's behaving, like she can't look Tom Robinson in the eye when she's accusing him, when he's giving his testimony, she can't look at him, and so there's a lot of good background acting in that trial scene.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and the way you brought up the exposition, I think that kind of goes with the classical style of storytelling that this movie did at the time, and surprisingly it still holds up, even though this movie is far from an easy watch, but I think it's a necessary watch if you're a fan of books, or if you're a fan of any kind of movies, because it's essentially a very important milestone when it comes to filmmaking, because I don't think many films at this time tackled these kind of social issues the same way To Kill a Mockingbird does.
I can't think of any from the early 1960s, maybe a little later when you have things like In the Heat of the Night and some other kind of bridging into the 1970s. There was probably some more socially conscious film, but definitely in the early 1960s, you probably would have saw less of that.
Yeah, and there's one quote that I saw here from, I believe it's the book. I can't exactly remember if it's in the movie as well, but it kind of encompasses the whole theme of the movie for me, and it's shoot all the blue jays you want, but it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. And the way they're kind of presenting the mockingbird in that sentence is like, oh, it's a creature of purity. It doesn't want to harm anybody, and that kind of goes with the guy on trial and with Boo. They don't want to harm anyone. They've just ended up with themselves in this really bad situation. And that's a quote that I think, since you're a teacher, that can be taught not only as an English lesson, but as a moral lesson.
Definitely, and that's when because we teach this novel every year, obviously, that's one of the really important quotes, which is said by Atticus at different point. Like, they bring that up early on in the movie, but I think it happens a little later in the book, because there's this whole plot with the kids. They don't think Atticus is cool. Like, he's a lawyer, he's older than all the other dads. Like, he's not a cool profession like a farmer. Like, he's just a lawyer. And they bring it up, like, Miss Monty's trying to help them, like, realize, hey, your dad's a cool guy. Like, he can make someone's will so airtight, nobody can argue it. It's like, yeah, but he can't, like, play football, like, he's too old. And so they bring up this idea at lunch where, like, oh, Atticus, when did you get a gun? Like, oh, I got one when I was about, like, 13 years old. And then he brings up the whole, yeah, shoot all the blue jays you want, but not mockingbirds. And mockingbirds don't do anything but sing for us. They're just trying to bring joy for us, which I think is more detailed in the book. And definitely Tom Robinson and Boo are mockingbird symbols, because, like, they just, like, you know, are just trying to be good people, even though Boo is a reclusive person. Like, he tries to do nice things for these children who he has kind of off to the side befriended. He gives them a lot of presents in this little knothole in the tree. And then Tom Robinson, he was just trying to help Mayella. Like, she tried to pretend that he only came to her house one time, but he had to pass her house every day going to and from work. And she always had some little chore for him to do, and it implies that he didn't charge her for these chores. He just kind of, as he says on trial, like, why did you do all these things? He says that he felt sorry for her, and for him, you can just see the horror on his face when he realizes that he said that out loud, because the prosecuting attorney also jumps right on that, because, like, you as an African-American person during this time, how dare you have the audacity to feel sorry for a white woman, which, you know, we know in our time, like, who cares? Like, we can all feel empathy for each other, but he was really kind of trying to play on the prejudices of that time.
Once again, never thought of it that way, but now I'm learning from you. It's like I'm in your class.
Another really important quote from the movie, a very beautiful scene where Scout has come home from school. They basically, in that time, you get to come home for lunch. She got into a fight with a classmate because some bad things had happened in the classroom. They go into more detail in the book, of course, which I always wish that they actually had this scene in the movie, because it's my favorite scene from the book. We learned that Scout's teacher, it's her first day of first grade, and it's the teacher's very first time ever teaching. She's really young. She's from a different part of Alabama. But basically, the movie condenses it to the important part where Scout gets in trouble for trying to stand up for another classmate, and also Scout got in trouble because she already knows how to read. The teacher is horrified in the book, like, oh my gosh, like, you already know how to read. Like, tell your dad to stop teaching you to read. And so Scout's very upset. 6-year-olds are very literal thinkers, so she thinks that her and her daddy can never read ever again, because he reads, like, the newspaper to her or legal papers. So Scout's actually pretty advanced as a student, and he tells her about compromise. And she thinks compromise is bending the law, and he's like, well, it's not quite like that. It's an agreement among mutual consent. And then he talks about, like, think about your teacher. It's her first day. She doesn't know everybody. And he gives this great quote about, you know, you don't really know someone until you walk around in their shoes and see things from their point of view. And that's another huge theme in the movie and in the book, is looking at different events from that other person's perspective and trying to really get to understand their motivation.
You're bringing more of these pearls of wisdom onto my mind now as we're going with this. There's one more point I wanted to bring up, and it's kind of related to a movie that came out this year that I feel does the same kind of thing that To Kill a Mockingbird was going for, but it updates it to this time, which I feel is going to be a future time capsule film. And I know you and Joe really liked Get Out, and to me that movie shows how social class has kind of changed, but you've still got that kind of tension in the same way To Kill a Mockingbird does. So as different as they are, I mean, Get Out's a more fun movie than this, but could you see those being like a potential double feature?
I never thought about pairing those two together, but they do kind of present similar themes in that, like people are being taken advantage of. Our main character in Get Out is being taken advantage of by this family, and Tom Robinson has been taken advantage of by this town. So that's definitely an interesting pairing. Usually we've tried to pair it up with a movie that came out a few years ago, The Help, because the time periods are similar, and very important character in To Kill a Mockingbird, Calpurnia, who is the housekeeper for Atticus. Atticus doesn't have a wife anymore. She passed away, and so this is a mother figure to Scout, but they don't get along very well. So she has a lot more book than she does in the movie. I wish they would have explored her character a little more, because she's really great at kind of making Scout, or trying to teach Scout lessons of Scout does this thing at lunch where she questions her friend pouring syrup all over the meal, which, sugar was very expensive in the 1930s, and he basically drowns his entire plate full of food in this syrup, and she's like, what have you gone and done that for? And so then Calpurnia and Scout have to have a little talk about when somebody is invited over, that's your company, and you don't question what they do, like you have to be polite. And their little friend that's come over from lunch, Walter, like his family doesn't have a lot of money. Like basically the dad had to get some legal help from Atticus, and they basically pay him back in like farm products, not in cash, because again it's the Depression. So Scout learns a lot of moral lessons from Calpurnia.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moral lessons that we could learn from this movie, and you've seen the show before, you know how this works. We're heading into the wrap-up stage now. So I want you to imagine that I'm a little plucky-faced, innocent kid coming into your class for the first time, and I've never seen To Kill a Mockingbird, so rather than sending me out of class, what are you going to tell me to get me to watch it right away?
Well, first of all, I would hope that you've read the book first before you watch the movie, because again, it is such a good book. But if you've never seen To Kill a Mockingbird before, you're going to have to suspend your notion of what a really good movie is. You're used to things that are flashy and have a lot of action and dialogue. This is a very, what we call a slow burn movie. It's very slow paced, but it's worth it, because even though it's an older movie, the characters are so great. This is like the one film where the child actors don't actually detract from the performance. They enhance it so much. So you're going to see the best child performances in any movie ever that I can think of, besides like Haley Joel Osment or something. Some of the greatest courtroom drama ever with Atticus in the trial, and it's a very emotional movie, and it'll move you. So that's definitely something that you need to see, and just ignore that it's black and white. It's okay to see old things. Old things are still good.
I think that's a great note to end off of. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on Movies and Me. We finally got you here, and I'm so glad that you came on to talk about this, because I feel this is going to be a great episode when it comes out. So where can the good people find you, and is there anything that you want to plug while you're here?
Of course, you can find me in a lot of places. If you just want to talk more about To Kill a Mockingbird and favorite scenes or whatever, you can follow me on Twitter at @that_Mrs. Davis. I also have a show over at the Tough channel with my husband called BFF Because Fan Friction, where we review some of the movies that have been featured on Fan Friction. We're going into our summer TV backlog hiatus, so be on the lookout for those videos if it hasn't already debut. You can also follow our mutual, which is called Geek to My Nerd, with underscores between all of the words on Twitter. And we also have a YouTube channel with the same name. where we've been doing some Let's Plays, and we're going to try to do some other video content on there as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I've watched some of your Let's Plays, and they're very fun, and that's coming from a guy who hates watching Let's Plays. So you and Joe, you make it really fun to watch. So guys, definitely go check those out. And guys, as always, you can use the hashtag #MoviesAndMe to help continue the conversation. Leave us a comment below, or send either me or Ashley a tweet. We'd probably love to talk further about this movie. And you're not going to be getting a video next week, but I've put 2 videos up today. You can head straight on over to Joe, your husband's video on Movies and Me, where he was talking The Big Lebowski. Look out for that, and there's another big announcement in Joe's episode. So if you guys like this episode, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.